Hello world and welcome to episode 23 of The Top Split, where I'm your host Alex McKellar, and joining me once again today is Top Split TV's co-commentator, the chaotic one, Corey Steinhauser. Welcome back, Corey.
Very glad to be here, Alex. It's been a while, a couple of weeks, but yeah, I'm glad to be back.
Awesome. Yes, well, only a couple of weeks, in fact 2 episodes I think. The one you did and then the one Ben did, and then we're back here again, so it's all good. So today we're going to take a quick look over the last couple of rounds of Sunday Night Lights, as well as the upcoming round 4 at Oran Park. Are you all set and ready to go, Corey?
I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Very good. Okay, so round 2 saw us at Road Atlanta, where a small error on lap 1 from Kane Halliburton through the S's saw Tim Hendrickson, Sammy J. Toykala and Timo Vascalampi. They broke away, and the three of them were essentially never headed from there, with ANZ's Stuart Adcock finishing 4th, nearly 9 seconds behind, but more on his run a bit later. But with the 3 guys out in front, the pressure was low, and the 3 leaders just went about their business, essentially winding the laps down until the final run out of turn 7 onto the really long back straight at Road Atlanta before the race. Well, it was decided, as you know, most people probably expected, but it was 3 wide into the 10A, 10B final chicane. Toykala and Vascalampi made a little bit of contact on the approach to the all important braking zone there with Hendrickson. He was hugging the outside from memory along the more traditional racing line, and Toykala was able to hold on. And I have to say, I was astounded, Corey, that it was in fact him who got the drive through 10A and B and up to the crest of the hill with Hendrickson hugging the inside line through 10B. It was in fact Toykala going on to take out the race with Hendrickson and Vascalampi in 2nd and 3rd respectively. Look, mate, I know it was a couple of weeks ago, but did you have any takeaways from that race?
Well, that race had a lot to try and digest. We also in that race seen the first race in skippies for Brenton Hobson, a well-known Australian YouTuber and Twitch streamer. And, you know, he started out very well. He was up towards that top 6. Then he actually became a victim of that 10A, 10B section, where he finally dropped down to about 12th, and that was where he sat for the rest of the race. But one thing that we definitely saw within that race in a whole was the draft is not necessarily as effective as it once was. The package seems to have been changed in a way where you can't exactly get that slingshot like you once used to in these skippies.
Yeah, that's right, mate. You really got to nail the exit of 7 out that back straight. You got to be within 3/10 probably on the exit and have the better drive. Get the move done prior to the kink and the crest of the hill on the approach down to that final chicane there. Otherwise, you're slowing each other down. So, yeah, you're right. The change in dynamics and the aero package on the Skippy once again this season coming into play. I had a couple of thoughts on it. Firstly, it was our highest strength of field in MNL SNL history. It was touched over 4,700. Massive. It was great points and I rating on offer for all the drivers, of course. Sammy J walked away with 266 official championship points. Massive. And 93 I rating. Amazing for a guy still sitting, just under 5K. To walk away with 93 I rating out of a single race is incredible. But these races have such an appeal for the top guys for that sort of reason. Take Tim Hendrickson in second. He's over 6.5 I rating, and he, for second still got 43. In a typical midweek race, he'd be lucky to get that in 3 race wins, let alone P2 of a single race. Similarly, Sasha Gourlay, he's around the 6K mark I rating, and he was down in 7th, but didn't end up losing I rating. Whereas again, in a midweek race, you'd see him lose a bag full of hard-earned I rating in that sort of situation. But of course, it's not just about the numbers, the opportunity to challenge yourself against some of the best going around, Corey. That's a great incentive in of itself, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Alex. And that's one point that I always try to get across in all of our broadcasts is the level of skill that we've been developing and gathering for these strength of field races on the Sunday night has been absolutely incredible. And we have been getting treated to some of the most spectacular racing that I have ever seen on iRacing itself.
Yeah, mate, it's been pretty cool to see some of the stuff that's going out there on track. The quiet achiever of that particular race, though, I mentioned it before, the ANZ driver Stuart Adcock. He failed to set a time in quali, and yet from his last place position on the grid, he drove through the field and finished in fourth. You know, it was an amazing drive. You know, it wasn't without its incidents. You mentioned before Brenton Hobson. His incident in the chicane was an unfortunate racing one between he and Adcock, who rear-ended Hobbo, unfortunately. But and that was a shame because Hobbo was going really, really well in his maiden SNL race, making the transition across from what he normally drives, Corey.
Yeah, exactly. Hobbo is generally a tin top racer or a dirt oval racer, as many people who subscribe to his channels would know. You can generally see him in a V8 supercar for the Monday night strength of field, or even V8 Scops, which is the top tier V8 supercar league for iRacing. And to see him make not just make the transition to a Skippy, but with probably an hour's worth of practice and be up there, you know, with the faster guys of the split was actually quite incredible to watch. And I'm glad that I quite quietly talked him into doing it, to be honest.
Yeah, looking forward, hopefully, to see him in the coming weeks. You know, but apart from that incident, I've been really impressed with Stuart Adcock's pace. Much like Greg Barber last season, he just needs a sprinkle of luck to go with his on-track speed, and I reckon he'll be right up there in the running. He had a good result there in P4, but otherwise results have been a little bit hard to find. So hopefully Adcock can be right up there with the front runners representing the club in the coming weeks. Now, moving on to Road America last week, what a race that was. The pack was sort of 6, 8, sometimes 10 deep at the front for almost the entire race. You know, the drivers put on a fantastic show. Anthony Catt, he grabbed pole ahead of top split debutant Jose Soria with Stuart Adcock, who we were just talking about, once again showing he's got the potential to really have an impact on this season, putting his car third on the grid. You know, interestingly, some of the front runners we are used to seeing were a bit further down the grid. Sammy J was in fourth, Ben Snell in seventh, and Vascalampi, he was all the way down in eighth position. He complained a little bit that his pace wasn't pleasing to himself during the week, but perhaps the biggest surprises were to see Tim Hendrickson and Tim Gorkrotcher down in 17th and 18th positions on the grid, respectively, having not set times. And what different paths their races would take. I mean, unfortunately, Tim Gorkrotcher had an incident very early on, taking him out of the race. But in for mine, what has been the drive of the season, at least so far, if not, you know, one of the drives of SNL history, Tim Hendrickson drove through the field to take a clear victory on the line. No draft or anything involved in his last corner exit and run to the line. He was in front and held on to it. He almost had to have 2 cracks at it in terms of coming through the field, with mid-race incidents almost bringing him unstuck and costing him the time he needed to get back up there. But as the scoreboard showed in the end, he raced hard, smart, and he picked his moments to make moves. And he went on to take out what was once again the top-rated race of the week. You know, a 4-car pack was thinned down to 3 going through Canada Corner in the closing stages of the final lap, with Soria involved in an unfortunate racing incident with pole sitter Catt, seeing the ladder off into the kitty litter and relegated to 7th position in the standings. But, you know, Team Milo's own Ben Snell, he had a sensational race in both terms of fun. I know he enjoyed the race, and his results, where he finished in second with Soria, parlaying his great run in quality and general speed overall into an exciting race throughout up front, and a podium finish, crossing the line in third. Now, Corey, you were in the booth with me for that one as well. What were your takeaways from that big race?
Well, one thing that I noticed, especially when we were talking about those mid-race incidents, was Tim Hendrickson is without a doubt probably one of the luckiest men alive from that race. I seen his rear end step out, and he got into the grass right as a crash was happening on the other side of the kink, and he went from grass back onto the track and somehow still managed to miss the two guys that were wrecking. And it was a very impressive feat. And then you take from that as well, he did not put down a time and had to start from the very back. It was, I don't know, it was just magical to see him doing that.
Yeah, mate, that was a pretty crazy save there going through the kick. So many people this season getting unstuck by. I'm going to put it down to aerodynamic changes to the car through high speed corners, particularly ones like the kink out the back after the carousel at Road America. The rear of the car gets really, really light and sketchy through there. Tim ran wide onto the grass. He was at 45-degree angle and counter steering into it. I tell you, 9 out of 10 folks would be in the wall there, and but he, as you say, made it to his advantage, dodging flying skippies of Henderson, I think it was, who got absolutely punted there, unfortunately. But yeah, look, a great drive there. But for me, that race was really interesting in a number of ways. It was an example of how a race can unfold from sort of multiple perspectives. I mean, I went and watched our broadcast replay back, and what you could see there was a flag-to-flag battle between the top drivers in the race, swapping positions, and no fewer than 5 drivers leading laps in the race, and more than that, probably taking turns for the lead. Hendrickson, of course, leading just the one, but most important lap of the race. So I also went and watched Ben Snell's replay of the race. He streamed the race live, and you can find Ben on Twitch, of course, where his channel's called Snellavision. And what I saw there was all the first-person action from a guy who was dicing with the leaders throughout. Ben was having a blast. He looked like he was having the best time, going toe-to-toe, and thoroughly looked like he was enjoying the race and obviously the result. I mean, he finished in second. Now, here's where we can start talking about diverging approaches to racing. Take the Road Atlanta race where the front three, once they had a bit of a gap, they just turned laps without pressuring or passing each other, just waiting for that last lap. Then you have race 1 week later, where you could throw a blanket over the top 8 to 10 drivers for most of the race. And places at the front were traded more frequently than footy cards on the schoolyard, from what I saw. But at what cost did that come? Lap times is the obvious answer, of course, but there is no way that Tim Hendrickson really should have won that race from where he was, on the grid at least. There's a good argument to say that he is one of, if not the fastest in that field, but he's not 1 to 1.5 seconds a lap quicker. There is no way that's the case. But that is the gap he pulled. He pulled that in the mid-stage laps of the race because the front pack were dicing so hard. What did you make of that, Corey?
Well, it was definitely a fact of, with everyone dicing as hard as they were, at times going 3 wide along the front straight and even along that very long back straight with a couple of kinks in it, that, they were losing so much time. And, the guys at the back that Hendrickson was racing with, they know his speed. They know that he's got the skill to be able to take them towards the front. They just let him lead, and, the rest is history after that. The leaders were losing so much time through their battles, especially when, they've all got to check up for each other and get back to single file at some point. But a lot of the time, they would end up still being too wide coming out of a corner.
Yeah, look, I wonder if they saw it too little too late, you know. I don't think any of them had their eyes on where Hendrickson was, starting so far back. But, you know, for me, I'm torn. You know, I could see the enjoyment that Ben was getting from the racing, and then I try to balance that with wanting to win the race and the enjoyment that would come from that. You know, personally, I saw times where drivers in that front pack were taking unnecessarily compromised lines that cost them buckets of times for the sake of getting to or staying at the front of that pack. You know, in my mind, you have to balance that with what pack racing on that sort of track is like as well. You know, like you can talk about losing time, but the pack racing there is sometimes you need to attack to defend. You know, if you're not the one pushing forward, so often there are drivers who will do so at your expense. You know, if you're sitting second or third, suddenly the guy in fifth's coming through and poking his nose in, whereas if you're attacking and closing that opportunity off, yes, it's costing you time, but it's also keeping your position at the front, you know. Because typically you can't win a race like that outside of the top three on the final lap or so. It does happen, but it's not kind of typical. Contrast that with Tim Hendrickson's race, where he was faced with cutting his way through all that traffic, but on the whole put down much faster lap times in what was again the week's strongest field without having to fight tooth and nail to do so. Now, here is where the question lies for me. What do you trade off? The fun of the hard racing or the fun of the win? From watching and speaking to both Ben and Tim, for example, I'd suggest both were equally pleased with the enjoyment that they had in the race, you know, in their respective cars. So I guess it's contextual at the end of the day. You know, Tim had to race like that to have the opportunity to win, whereas Ben was up there anyway, and probably, you know, there was no great harm in him racing the way he did. But I don't know, Corey, maybe there's no right or wrong answer in that one.
Well, Alex, personally, I don't believe there is a right or wrong answer in that respect. I mean, when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, Tim being such an experienced and such a quick driver, he doesn't exactly get challenged all that often, especially during midweek racing. But, you know, you throw him at the back of a pack on the strongest strength of field of the week and say, if you want to win this, you're going to have to race as hard as you ever raced in your life. You know, of course, there's going to be moments that might frustrate him a little bit, but Timmy, being the racer that he is, he would absolutely relish a challenge like that. And as we've seen, he came out on top, and he did it with the happiest sounding voice that I've ever heard him have in an interview. And you know, going back to Ben and, you know, him having fun with his battles, Ben is a very quickly improving driver, especially with the way that the Skippies handle now. It's right up his alley, the way that, you know, you've got to slide the car to be fast in certain places. And, you know, that shows on track with his results this season. I mean, you compare it to last season in the points, and he's head and shoulders above where he was. I mean, yeah, we're racing different tracks and it's a different car, but, you know, the car in itself is just more towards his style now.
Yeah, mate. Well, I think you're right. Both of them were very or equally happy with their races last week for different reasons, probably. And that's the story of each of their races combined, I guess. But yeah, certainly the skips this season playing into the hands of some of the more skillful guys who missed out last season. But yeah, moving on to this week, though, we're heading to the incredibly technical and challenging Oran Park Raceway. Of course, the track in real life has been replaced by housing estates, but we still get to enjoy this really, you know, it's a fun track on iRacing and, of course, in Sunday Night Lights. But such a challenging track to master. We don't often see it outside of the Skip Barber series, but so many of the guys who do actually turn up to race the track sing the praises of this car and track combination. The big news for us this week, though, Corey, for the first time in a few seasons, I'm not able to present the SNL broadcast myself due to family commitments, but never fear, folks. The chaotic one is here. That's right. I'm leaving the key under the mat. And Corey, you'll be taking on the Top Split TV SNL broadcast reins, mate. How are you feeling about the challenge I've laid down before you?
Well, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit nervous about stepping in your shoes, but I'll promise I'll keep the seat warm. And as one Formula One driver once said to the other when one was racing in Monaco, I'm going to pee in your seat.
Thanks, mate. So tell me, because you know we haven't chatted much about it yet, so this is a good opportunity. What's your broadcast setup look like?
So I have two screens, and I primarily use sim racing apps for my broadcasts. I do midweek broadcasting for an NASCAR league called the Output Racing League. You can check them out at outputracing.com for more information on that. So I just have a very basic setup. I have iRacing on one screen, and I'll generally have all my broadcast stuff, including my broadcast software, over on my other screen. And I'll use my sim racing apps to change camera angles and move through the field. I've also got a little relative set up for it so I can see who is in a battle within 5 cars. I've got a standing setup which also shows me the strength of field. But I'm probably going to be using that one on broadcast itself so everyone can have a look at it. That's if I don't get some other software sorted out in time, which I hopefully should be able to. But yeah, we're going to be trying to focus a lot on the battles because battles are very exciting, not just for spectating, but for broadcasting as well. It gives us something to talk about, and with the complex but simple configuration that is Oran Park, I'm sure we're going to be in for an absolute treat of a race, Alex.
Yeah, mate. Look, it's a very satisfying track to get right. Of course, very technical, as I said before. I've been working hard during this week. Done a few races, done a few time trials, and look, as I said before, the high speed corners, the rear of the car is challenging. So that turn 1 2 complex there, where you sort of crest through the apex of turn 1, it was sketchy at the best of times, but in this car, it's quite a ride. But yeah, so the guys no doubt will put on a good show, and it's up to you, mate, to bring it to us. Now, I comparing setups there. I use two screens as well. I used to use four when I had the triples going, but now I've got the one big one down the bottom and one up the top. You're a bit nervous about. I use ATVO to do the overlays, so the overlays will look a bit different this week, folks. Don't be stressed. It's Corey's uses a slightly different setup to what I do, but that's okay. Perhaps I'll give you some run through on ATVO at some stage down the track should the case come up. But I'm sure that your race package will be awesome, mate. And I really do appreciate it. Stepping in, giving me a chance to have that time with the family, mate. But were there any questions you had that I might be able to answer? Because I've been doing this for a little bit, you know.
Oh, there is many questions I'd like to ask. Um, One of which being, how do you remain so entertaining even when there might not be, much going on the track, which I don't think will be a problem at Oran Park with it being such a small track. But it's just a question that's plagued me for a while, being a NASCAR broadcaster, and they string out and there's not much to talk about.
Yeah, well, thank you, first of all. I appreciate the compliment. But I read an interesting article about sim racing broadcasting and about telling a story within there. The bits that really helped me a lot is being part of the series and knowing and having raced with a lot of the guys in there. Being part of the community helps you have that little bit of information. Like I can imagine professional broadcasters, pour over Wikipedia entries and press kits and all that on whatever sport they're covering, little bits of interesting information. But we don't have that opportunity. It's a club level style racing, and the stories that we pick up along the way are generally based on our experience with the drivers. So for me, knowing a bit about the drivers is important, but you get that through time with them, and you've got that. You spend time in the community and racing with people, whether it be the local guys in FNRC or out there in track more broadly. You see it in the streaming that people do and all the rest of it. The other thing is to know a bit about the car and the track. Racing them really helps because you know where the tough bits are. You know that at Oran Park, that first corner there is one of the most challenging things you will ever do in a race car. And then that the time through the second sector is where the real technicians will make up their time, because you're stringing third gear corners together there in succession, and lines, and really challenging yourself to use all the circuit through there and finding that turn-in point and how aggressively do I take all those sorts of things. Knowing that from on-track experience really, really helps. But as far as entertainment goes, for me, it's about finding the story in the race, who started where, how far they're progressing, what sort of battles are going on, and of course our telemetry software helps us find different battles throughout, trying to give as many people airtime as possible to raise interest from different spectator groups as well, and just finding that story within the race, who started where, how far they've progressed, who's gone, what does that mean for their title chances, both in SNL and official stuff. There's a story in every race, Corey. It's our challenge and our pleasure to sort of find it in each race.
Yeah, I think I've got the idea there, and I hope the listeners would also get an idea if anyone's looking at getting into broadcasting themselves. Me and Alex will be completely happy to talk you through it a little bit. We both got differing experience in the area, with Alex doing the Sunday Night Lights and what was previously Monday Night Lights, and myself doing the NASCAR broadcast. So if you guys are listening to this and you want to start up broadcasting, don't forget, just give us a yell. We'd be more than happy to point you in the right direction from our personal experiences, or even talk to both of us and get both sides of the coin.
Yeah, everyone brings their own different piece to it, and of course people will get to experience your take on it this week, mate. So I know I'll be looking to enjoy my seat in the peanut gallery. So yeah, so the show will go on this week with Corey stepping up to what is a very big challenge. Certainly I'm very grateful for him doing so, and I'm sure the community will be as well. I mean, we've been building tremendously since our move to Sunday nights last season, and we're grabbing that top strength of field each and every week, sometimes by quite a margin, which brings me great pleasure and satisfaction that we can build that platform that we talk about for the guys to really have some top flight racing. And once again, showing that Top Split TV is the place to be for the best skippy racing around. So thanks to Corey. We can continue to build, and a shout out to all our drivers to get out there on track and continue to support the series and the broadcast this week. It'll be interesting, irrespective of the broadcast, to see what sort of field we get. I should say. This track isn't everyone's favourite, that's for sure, but it does tend to be popular with the top guys on the whole, because it really is a technical challenge, and it presents an intense satisfaction when you go fast here. So good luck to you, Corey, mate. Like I said, I'll be looking forward to checking out how you go. Of course, the Sunday Night Lights broadcast will be live on Top Split TV from 9:15 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is GMT plus 10 at the moment. So join us on the track or for the live broadcast on the Top Split TV Twitch channel. If you are in the race, Corey and Tim Gorkrotcher will be doing the co-commentary this week. They'll be in the Top Split Discord server for the broadcast and the post-race interviews, so make sure you join them there. And the broadcast replay will be up on the Top Split YouTube, along with all the back catalogue of our races. And you can always find anything Sunday Night Lights or podcast related at the topsplit.com website. All those details, along with where you can find Corey and his racing streams, will be in the description of the podcast below. But Corey, for now, let the folks know at home where they can find you.
So you guys can find me at twitch.tv/Corey Has No Life 13. We will put up a mature content warning. I do use some fairly colourful language to describe certain people, but we have a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you guys coming and having a watch.
Awesome. Well, fun is what it's all about. So thank you once again for joining me today, Corey, and a big thank you for stepping up to continue our collective support of the Skippy community by taking on this week's broadcast. But also thank you to everyone who has been supporting the Sunday Night Lights series. We're continuing with our great start to the season, and your support is very, very much appreciated. That'll about do us for today. If there's anything you'd like us to cover on this show, please reach out to us on all the places we are, that are, of course, as I said, listed in the podcast description below. We'd love to hear more from our audience in what you want to see and hear about. If you like what we do too, please show your support by liking, subscribing, clicking thumbs up, and all those sort of things on the different content platforms that we present our material. It really does help. Even leaving comments on iTunes, where you can find this podcast, really helps make us more visible in sharing this great hobby that we all enjoy so much. Until next time, though, I've been your host, Alex McKellar, and on behalf of Corey Steinhauser, thank you for joining us here at the Top Split. And until next time, ciao for now.